Greetings, this is Jim Lindsay. This is a tutorial over topics presented in Chapter 15 of your textbook. This is for CIS 141. I'm on the Blackboard page for Chapter 15. I'm recording this in the summer of 2015, so if I use this in the fall of 15 or spring of 16, don't fret if it looks a little bit different. But what you can see as you look at this list, basically you're watching this right now. PowerPoint slides that I'm going to be using are available for you for download right here, so if you want to download those, please feel free to. There are a lot of really good notes a lot of good information for you in the note sections of many of the pages, so feel free to download those and use them. I'll ask you to refer to these guys down here during the Chapter 15 lesson. So for example, at a certain point during the Chapter 15 lesson over physical security, I'll ask you to watch this. Use this link right here and watch the first 4.5 minutes of it. This is a movie that I made for a computer forensics class, and so when I say, hey, go watch the physical security video, watch that from its start to the 4.5 minute point. I'll also refer to these videos down here. These are links right here to apps that you can put on your Apple and Android devices that I think you guys will greatly find a tremendous amount of use for. So that's what this stuff is for. Down here I have a link to that I'll show you a little bit later for a really great free backup utility. It's software. It's a utility program and system software that is wonderful for backing up files on your computer, and so I'll ask you to use that link. And then lastly, I'll ask you to use this link right here to open up a story from Forbes.com about the Target Corporation. So that's the lay of the land as far as how do you use this stuff in the lesson. Well, that's how you do it. So now let's get into the actual content. So I'll meet you back here in just a moment. All right, here's my PowerPoint slide presentation, the one I showed you on the Blackboard site. This is the overview of what we're going to be talking about. You can see from the overview that we're going to be talking about physical security. We're going to be talking about privacy. Back in Chapter 9, we talked about computer network security, and this is going to be talking about security from a different perspective, not network stuff, but different aspects of security that you also need to keep in mind. We buy computers because we want to put them on networks. We want to connect through the internet to all sorts of World Wide Web resources. But besides the network stuff, there's also just real foundational physical security stuff that we also have to keep in mind. So that's what this chapter brings out for you. So we'll be talking about those items, and then we'll get into those privacy items. We'll also talk about as it says there, software piracy and some other stuff. So it's a really, again, another big chapter. Chapter 9, as I mentioned to you, was about that network security, and that can be an entire career. If you want to be a network administrator, that could be an entire career. This stuff is part of that, and the privacy stuff is the privacy concerns that I hope you will have as you read this and as you think about the remedies that they recommend to you for privacy concerns. I hope you'll incorporate those into your computing habits as you use computers now and in the future. So this is what these are the topics that we'll be looking at. Why should you care? Well, just very briefly, that the reasons that you want to care about this are the same reasons that you would want to care about network security. People steal computers, and computers are mechanical devices, and they break and they wear out. And that's why I have the picture of the Boy Scout, the kid from Up. You probably recognize this dude from the Up movie if you saw that. The motto of the Boy Scouts is be prepared. So I got this kid right here. At some point, computers that you're using are going to fail. They do. They're just devices, and they fail. And so you need to be thinking about that, thinking about ways to have contingency plans in place for your data and how to survive that crisis, as easily as possible. In addition to that, people also steal stuff. And so when we talk about the physical security aspect of it, and you'll see some examples of that as we go through this, basically, there are things you can do to reduce the amount of vulnerability that your systems have. And so I want to make sure that you're aware of those. And so that's the left side of the screen. The right side of the screen, you have the V is for Vendetta masks on people carrying basically a mock casket for privacy. In our networked internet society, it's your privacy is very much not what it used to be. People can learn a lot about you from your internet and your World Wide Web habits now, and they do, and there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for career in marketing. Learning how to exploit that information and turn around and market things to people accordingly. So that's why we're looking at privacy. What is collected about you? How is it collected? How does that affect you? How can you respond to that if that bothers you? That sort of stuff. And so that's why we're looking at these particular topics. All right, so first let's get into this whole idea of physical security. And as you begin this chapter, it starts to talk about hardware loss and hardware damage and system failure and catastrophic events that can destroy your computer and the systems that you use. And so I have pictured for you, like a guy who's a thief taking a laptop, a coffee cup or a teacup spilling onto a laptop. That happens. That's happened to me. You have down here in the right corner, you have a picture of lightning strike and a tornado. Looks like a terrible night. That happens. That's happened here in Kentucky in the last week. And so these are things that happen, and as a computer user, you need to be aware of them and then be aware of ways to protect yourself from them. Just to give you a couple of examples of these things occurring in my working career. A couple of years ago, the entire information system staff went to a conference together. That's never happened in the preceding 12 years that I'd worked here. We'd never gone to a conference together, and it was a blast. We had a great time. It was called the Sloan Consortium, and it was all about online education, and we learned a lot of really great stuff. But at one point during the week, there was a negative thing that happened. One of the guys that I work with has a MacBook Air, or had a MacBook Air. It's really tiny, beautiful laptop. It's very thin, and we're all in this, and it's down in Orlando, and we're all sitting in this, and basically like this restaurant, and people, you can order from different places, and so we're all sitting there, and the guy that I work with put his MacBook right there on a table with everybody here, but at some point during that lunch, somebody walked by and picked up that MacBook, and we never saw it. And that guy's computer was gone. And we had find your iPhone on it, and did his best to try and track it down, but the people that stole it never connected it to the internet for that to kick in, and that thing never came back. And so several $1,000s of computer resources gone, just in a blink of an eye. It's gone. A dude stole it, or I assume it was a dude. And so that happens. I told you about like the center thing, like with the drink spilling. I was working grading using a laptop, not this laptop, but a few laptops ago, and spilled a drink right there on the laptop. I flipped it over immediately, tried to drain all the stuff out, but still ended up replacing the keyboard and some other components with it, because the sugar from the drink got into the keyboard, and as you'd press keys, as you try to type later, certain keys would stick. And that, fortunately, that wasn't a loss. I was able to able to fix that one. It cost me about $80, $85 to get a replacement keyboard, and I paid for that because I spilled the drink. But just that's money that I wish I hadn't spent. It would have been smarter to put my drink on another table, but that kind of stuff happens. And then lastly, this lower right corner. When I was a college student at Western, I was in a fraternity in Sigma Alpha Epsilon, and one of the guys that I was in the fraternity with, his dad worked at this company called Cash America. It was just this chain of pawn shops all the way from mainly down in the southeast, down in Florida, a lot of stuff in Texas, through Kentucky and all around here. And a lot of guys, as they graduated, they were a lot of the business graduates. They got jobs with Cash America, and they worked there for several years. And one of the things that happened at Cash America that I thought was really impressive. Basically, their headquarters was in Houston, and they had their headquarters for this multi-state organization is in this high-rise building in Houston, and a tornado comes rolling through and slams into that building, and the Cash America stuff was destroyed. I mean, people got hurt. I don't think anybody got killed in that particular tornado, but their computer system just got obliterated. What's impressive, though, is they had a really great backup plan in place and basically a disaster recovery plan in place, and they had practiced it. And within a day, they were back up and running at a separate location, even though the high-rise where all their stuff had just been leveled by a tornado. So that's, having that kind of a system in place is what you want if you're an IT person. That's the sort of resilience and robustness that you want in your system. And so these kinds of things are addressed in this chapter. As you read this, it talks about how to build that stuff, how to, or at least gives you an introduction. Again, this is an entire career. If you want to go to network administration, security type of stuff, you'll be doing this 24/7. So it's really great stuff to know how to do. Okay, so let's look at how do we do this? Well, the first thing I want you to do, I alluded to a physical security movie that I wanted you to watch as I was doing the intro for this lesson. One of the classes I've taught in the past is this computer forensics class, and I don't teach it right at this moment. The program that we taught that in has actually moved to a separate college. It grew to the point, just to brag on our department for a second, we grew that thing to the point that we couldn't staff it anymore. And I taught a couple of classes in that program, the computer forensics class and then a PHP programming class that were a lot of fun to teach. In the forensic stuff, I got to do a whole bunch of training with law enforcement guys. I got to do a couple of 100 hours of training with really cool forensic software, and part of all that was basically getting the certification to be an evidence collection guy for this firm that I used to work for in Nashville. And so this lesson, that video that you see pictured right there, that's part of that computer forensics class. And if you're going to be a civilian computer forensic technician, you have to have very secure locations where nobody can get to your data, because if people do get to your data, it basically puts the integrity of your data in question, and then you're going to lose cases. And you're dealing with law firms, you're dealing with prosecutors, you're dealing with all sorts of defense lawyers. And so it's a really important aspect of that job. So in a moment, what I'd like for you to do is go over and watch that first 4.5 minutes of that video, and it talks about computer security. And again, it's talking about it from a computer forensic standpoint, but even though it's talking about it from that standpoint, it still applies to everyday business owners, because if let's say you go into the insurance business and you're collecting health information about your people you're selling insurance to, or you're a dentist, or you're an eye doctor, or you're a physician of some sort, and you're collecting information about, does this person have this particular condition or that condition, that stuff is protected by regulations like HIPAA and stuff like that. And so you have to guard that data, and so that physical security applies to a lot of industries, not just computer forensics. So watch that. I'll pause this video, go over and watch that one for 4.5 minutes, and then I'll see you back here in just a little while. Okay, hopefully you watched that. And then, so with those things in mind, there are a couple more deals I wanted to tell you about, and they're talked about in your chapter. And there are things like this. If you have any kind of mobile device like a laptop or a tablet, you can get these cables that look a lot like bike locks. And if you go to the airport, and you see business people traveling, you'll see these a lot of the time. If we had one of these on that computer down in Orlando, that my friend's laptop wouldn't have disappeared on us. But basically what happens is you take this cable, and on every laptop, every tablet, you're going to see a groove in there where this thing, basically there's a combination lock right there. That slides into that groove, and when you set the combination, these teeth pop out, and they lock into the frame of this thing, and you have this cable wrapped around something really heavy, like the corner of a solid piece of furniture. And so if somebody tries to grab your stuff and walk off with it, they may drop it, but they're not going to get away with it. And so these notebook locks, these security cases that are on this thing right here, this cable you see right there, those are all really wise things to keep on your devices, especially your work devices. This encrypted USB key that you see right here, this is also a really cool deal. And basically the way that this works is you slide this USB key into your computer and have the operating system set up so that in order for this machine to run, that key has to be in it, and when you put it in, you have to type in a PIN code so that it works. And so if somebody gets your stuff, they're not going to be able to read it. And so in addition to, and this is basically an example of a possessed object, we talked about possessed objects that you use for access to systems. This is an example of a possessed object which would be used to prevent somebody from being able to look at the data on your device. One last example for you, and that's from this summer. I was traveling with as a chaperone with a youth group, and we went on a trip to Kansas City, Kansas. And on the way back, we stopped at St. Louis to go to the City Museum. And if you've never been there, you need to go. I don't care how old you are. That's a really cool place. But anyway, when we were parked at the City Museum, we had 5 vans, and 3 of the vans got broken into. And one of the guys that was traveling with us, his laptop from his job got stolen in that process. But it had an encrypted hard drive, and he had a system in place where basically they could track down that device. And as a result of that, then the laptop wasn't a total loss. And so they had like trade stuff on there, and he had to have that so he could do some work during the week while we were doing our stuff in Kansas. And so unfortunately the device did get stolen, but the people that got it are not going to be able to do anything with it other than just scrap it and use some of the parts. And so that encryption on the drive itself was really helpful. And so these are some things that will help you basically protect your devices. These are discussion questions I would ask you to answer in class. And based on what you've heard from the computer forensics video, based on what you've read in the book, based on what we've talked about in the last couple of minutes, you should be able to answer questions like these. And hopefully, as a result of those, you will be wiser and better able to care for your computing systems at your place of work. Okay, so let's move on to mobile devices, specifically for your Apple and your Android devices. And there is device tracking software that you can put on them that's free, and it's really great stuff. I want to show you what some of that looks like. I'm going to switch over to my browser real quickly. And by the way, that's the video for the physical security right there. That's when you watch the first 4.5 minutes of. These next two, These next two look like this. Over here on the Blackboard list, you'll see demonstration of Find My iPhone and this demonstration of Plan B for the Android. They look like this. This is the demonstration of the Find My iPhone, and that is the demonstration of the Plan B for the Android. And if you have either of those types of devices and you don't have software like that on that device, one of your homework assignments today is to go put it on there. This stuff is great. It's free, and they'll show you as you watch the videos basically how it works. And essentially it allows you, if you lose your Apple or your Android device, you can track it down. You can actually shut it down. You can wipe the hard drive from wherever you are. What's cool about this Plan B for the Android device, you can even push this out to your phone after you've lost it. So, you know, unlike the Apple, with the Apple devices, you have to put Find My iPhone on it before you lose it. With the Plan B, even after you've lost the phone, you can push it out there and then find the phone and then try and get it back or wipe it from a distance. Really cool stuff. And so some information about Plan B and Find My iPhone are at those links right there. And again, those are listed for you in these 4 links right here. So please watch either of those. You don't have to watch both, but watch one of those videos, whichever one pertains to what kind of device you have. If you don't have any of them, either kind, then just choose one of those videos and watch it, and then try to answer these questions you see right here. You'll see some questions that are pertinent to that sort of software. Okay, so once you've looked at those questions, once you've thought about those, once you've basically constructed an answer to those, the next thing we want to look at from this section of the chapter, and this is basically like the first half of the chapter, this whole idea of hardware loss and damage and system failure. It talks about stuff that I'm sure you have considered. If you have a tablet or you have a smartphone, you probably have a protective case on it. If you don't, then I encourage you to get one. And the reason that you want those is because if you drop the device, the screen cracks, right? And then if you get the broken screen, at best it's ugly to look at. If at worst, you can't read it or it cuts you as you try and use it. And so put protective cases on there. It goes to the extreme, and it shows you like these ruggedized devices that are used in the military and law enforcement, and these ruggedized phones. And so people working in oil fields and all these kind of really rough industries have these devices that you can like literally wash off with a hose, and that's pretty cool. But most of us don't need that. Most of us can't afford that. So pretty cool things. In addition to these protective measures that are described in the book, it also talks about some backup stuff that are basically some disaster recovery kind of stuff that I hope you'll get. It talks about, for example, uninterruptible power supplies, these UPSs, and these are great. And this is a surge protector that basically a power strip with a surge protector on it. And then you've got like this uninterruptible power supply pictured right here. This APC is a very reliable brand. I have about 5 of those, and they work great, and they last a long time. And basically what this is a giant battery. It's about like, think about like if you have a riding lawnmower, there's like a riding lawnmower battery inside of this thing, and it's plugged into the wall, and whenever it's plugged into the wall, it's charging up your battery. And if for whatever reason the power drops at your building, your computing devices plugged into this thing will continue to stay on. And you can also put it on on your really nice TVs, your routers, your voice over IP phone systems, anything that basically is like a small computer. You can plug them into these UPSs, and what it does for you is a temporary power outage. In that sort of case, you're not going to lose your connection. And also there's a surge protector built in here, so if lightning strikes your house or something like that, you have a chance at least that the devices plugged into this aren't going to be zapped by that big surge in power. And so these are really great devices. Certainly get those for work. Certainly get those for any kind of servers that you have at your place of business. If you have a server and they're not plugged into a UPS, then you need to slap yourself, because you're talking about really expensive hardware and software that just basically plug right into the regular AC outlet, and that's dangerous. And so get yourself one of these UPSs. Check that thing out. Okay, we're making good time, and then here's the last part, or the last component of this part of the chapter. And basically, when you're trying to protect your data, because at some point something's going to fail, the hard drive's going to wear out. It's just going to break for whatever reason. Computers are, whatever reason comes up, at some point your computer's going to wear out and break. If you've been backing up your data, then you have a copy that you can go to, and we've talked about the whole strategy of having like multiple tapes in different locations, so that for your businesses at least, so that you're protected even in the case of like flood or fire. There's a copy of your data off-site so that you can go and get it. Well, the same kind of pertains to your personal data too, and I've showed you pictures of these before too. This is an example of this is a USB external hard drive, and these are real inexpensive. I showed you some of these in the storage lesson. Get one or two of these, back up your data to them, keep one at the dorm, one at your house, or one at work, one at your house, and then if your system fails, you have a couple of backups that you can get to so you can continue to function. Especially important once you get into business. I do this with my work stuff. I have a blue one and a black one, and I back up to both of them. So I encourage you to do this, and it may save you. You're still always the headache of when you get a new computer to replace it. You have to put all the software and all that stuff on there, but at least you have your data, and that's really the most valuable part. So hold the phone. I'm throwing this in the center of this video here. If you have an external device like this, I want to show you a piece of software that's free and works great for backups on a Windows computer anyway. And it looks like this. I'm going to jump over to the Blackboard site. There's a website called roadkill.net with one L, and they have this product called the Unstoppable Copier, which works great. Let me show you the Blackboard. Okay, I'm at the Blackboard site. I have a link right here to roadkill.net's Unstoppable Copier page. So you click on that link and you open it up. It looks like this. You can choose which version of Windows that you're using, and then click on the download button and get this. It's completely free. Now what I'll do is I'll go to my desktop, and I want to show you what this looks like when you use it. It looks like this. The icon for it is a cat. I had no control over that, but it looks like this. And so you can see, for example, I have a couple of things hooked into USB drives, E drive and F drive here, and you choose what you want to copy, the source, and then a target where you want it to put it, and you hit copy. What's cool about this is it will copy stuff in zipped up files, in really deep files. If you have like a bunch of folders nested, which I get all the time, because I'll have like the summer 2015 folder, and then inside of that will be this class, and then another class, and like your student work, and then this. And so you may once you finally get to the folder where stuff is, you may be a dozen levels deep, but it doesn't throw this thing off at all. It works great, and then as it copies, it tells you how many things it got correctly, and if it had any trouble in the process. And so that's how you use this. So Roadkill's, and you'll see that the spelling of it is with a single L. Roadkill's Unstoppable Copier is a wonderful product. So check that out. It's completely free. If you're using a Mac, the Mac OS includes something called Time Machine, and whenever you plug in let me get this guy just out of the way. When you plug in an external hard drive like this, you can use this Time Machine to basically start putting I'm losing the thought here, but basically the exact term for it. But basically, it's a differential backup, and so it's only going to back up the stuff today that was different than from what was done yesterday. And so your backup size stuff is really small, and it does it really quickly. And also, what it does, one of the reasons they call it Time Machine, is let's say you're working on a paper, and you've been editing this paper for the last 2 weeks. And so over the last 2 weeks, you have like 14 different versions of it. Well, if you decide, you know what, I really like what I wrote 8 days ago, let me go back to that version. With Time Machine, you can flip back to the version 8 versions ago and pull it out through Time Machine, and it's saved through the differential backup on your external drive, and that's free. It's part of your Mac OS operating system. So take advantage of that if you're using a Mac. Really cool stuff. But these are great tools, and they help you protect your data. That's the conclusion of the first part of this chapter, talking about the physical security of your devices. And so what the next part gets into, it gets into privacy and piracy and some things like that. Very quickly, I wanted to just mention software piracy to you. And what I'd like to say to you about that, software piracy, of course, is when you copy something that's copyrighted that you're not supposed to be copying. And that could be songs, that could be movies, that could be any number of things, but usually it's movies or music, especially at college campuses. And at Western anyway, if you're connected to the network while you do that and they catch you, they'll punish you pretty severely. The IT shop has some pretty strict rules in place. Like, and initially they'll boot you off the network for a short period of time. Make sure they'll force you to make sure that you uninstall stuff that you're not supposed to have on your machine for copying copyrighted stuff and so on. So make sure that you're not doing that. When you get software, especially software, it's going to have something called an end user license agreement, the EULA, and this is talked about in your book. That EULA is going to tell you what you're allowed to do, and nobody reads the EULAs. When you install software, you just kind of say okay, hit OK, and go through there. But as an example, like this Office 365 stuff, and you guys have access to this from through Western. You guys can install Office 365 on, at least with our license at Western, up to 5 different devices. And so, if you do that, you're not violating the EULA, because it says, hey, at Western at least, you can put it on your laptop, on your desktop, on your computer at home, on your mom and dad's computer, and on your friend's computer, because you use all 5 of those to do your stuff. And so knowing what the EULA says is important. And so these end user license agreements are part of staying out of trouble and not pirating software. All right, so let's look at this last half of this chapter, and we're going to go through this a lot faster than we went through the first half. With the second half of the chapter, it's talking about your privacy, your information privacy, and it defines that for you. And then it goes into a good discussion saying, like, these are threats to your information privacy, and then these are ways to protect yourself. And what I'd like to do is just basically, I want you to read a news story, because this news story basically embodies, and it does a great job of demonstrating like all this stuff, like, well, at least the database part. And then in addition to that, it brings up some really great business questions. So over in Blackboard, let me jump over here real quickly. There's a link to this Target story right here, and what I want you to do is click on that, and it looks like this. It's from Forbes. This is a few years old now, but it's a great story. And as you can see from the headline, basically Target, their marketing people figured out that a teenager was pregnant before her family did. And how did that happen? How did they do that? Well, as you go through here and you read this story, you're going to learn that. And so what I'd like for you to do is read this story and then come back to the presentation, and I want you to be able to answer these questions right here, because so you have this presentation that you can get from Blackboard. You have the link to the story. So read the story and then come back and be able to answer these questions. I'll be back with you after you've done that. So pause this, and I'll meet you once you're done with all that. Okay, hopefully you read that story. Hopefully you've thought about these questions. the thing I would like to mention to you next is that basically, I don't think this is a bad thing. I think that the use of technology by Target, and Target is not the only entity that does this, but Target's use of this technology to better their organization is just phenomenal. It's just a wonderful example. We teach this in our business informatics program. If you're looking for a major and this kind of appeals to you, business informatics is something that you'll want to check out. We're looking at large data sets and looking at how would you determine X or Y, and as you look at this huge bunch of customer data, who is your customer and where do they live and what is their income and all that sort of stuff, and by looking and mining out, it's called data mining. That's one of the things involved in this, and by mining out the valuable stuff from this huge data set, you can then start to make educated decisions about how to react in a very proactive and effective way. And so if you like this sort of stuff, check out the business informatics major. That's something that we can teach you, and it's a very lucrative field. Like the guy that's the Target guy that's described in here, he has increased their business by billions of dollars. It's with a B. And you tell me, you think that guy's getting paid a lot of money? Yeah, he is, and for a good reason. He's really helping that corporation advance just that one segment of their business. So that's one of the things I want to bring up to you. Now, next, in the last part of this chapter, it goes into something about electronic surveillance and employee monitoring. And how does this affect you? Well, basically, if you get a job somewhere and they have computers and you use their computers to do your job, which you will, you need to know that that's the company's stuff. And if you do personal stuff on there, they're going to look at it, or they can look at it. And if they do, there's not anything you can do about it. It's their stuff, and you need to know that. If that bothers you, essentially what you need to do is you need to start your own company. And then what's funny about that is if you start your own company and then you get employees, guess what you're going to do? You're going to start monitoring them and watching what they do, which would drive you crazy and drove you to start your own business. But how do they do that surveillance? Well, there's a software which helps with that. And as you read about in the text, it talks about ways to monitor what websites people are frequenting, capturing screenshots, keystroke loggers, and all that sort of stuff. And now that's described in here. In addition to that, you also have video surveillance, which obviously you can keep track of. Are my employees staying by their computers and doing their job, or are they all going to the break room all the time? Are they going outside to smoke all the time? You can learn that kind of stuff through a combination of monitoring software as well as video surveillance. And then on top of that, there's something called presence technology. What this presence technology does, if your employees have phones, for example, let's say they have a company issued phone, based on its proximity to their desktop machine or their cubicle or whatever, it can keep track of things and tell you information. So your employer may do things like this, and if they do this, well, you basically have to come to peace with it or quit, and then find something else to do or start your own business. So with this stuff in mind, with what you've read about, what you've heard, I'd like for you to be able to answer these questions right here. This is where us being in online classes versus face-to-face is a bummer, because these are great things to talk about. Hearing people's feelings about this and opinions as to why they feel that way, it's very, very interesting. So I wish that we were in a classroom at this point, but we're not. So if you would pause this video, look at these questions, and I'll talk with you when you come back. Okay, and that does it, my friends. That's the conclusion of this chapter. There are other things in the chapter that it talks about that I didn't bring up, but I don't talk about everything in the chapter. That's crazy talk. So hopefully hopefully I interested you with something, or provoked a thought that you didn't have before. If you have questions, let me know. But other than that, I thank you for your time and attention. Have a good day.